Recording in progress. Okay, so, well, there was us talking about what we could banter about before it became 11 o'clock, and it's become 11 o'clock.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to 2026.
Mm,
And Bob is all raring to go, but before we are interested in anybody who has got their New Year's resolutions in the chat. Just pop in there if you've still got them active, because the research Bob was just sharing is that most gyms. What was it, Bob? Up until the, what was it, 17th, was it, of January?
seventh. No, seventh. Most gyms allow for the fact that people who buy membership to get fit in the new year, they will regularly attend the gym up until the 7th of January, and then it starts to wane. So it's kind of scary that people have paid either an annual subscription or a monthly subscription, and they probably only use 7 days of it.
All right. Well, still active. Good. Well done. And for those of you who are less inclined, oh, Deborah, well done. Alcohol free.
Yay!
Bob's still dry because he's on medication, which is a blessing for his alcohol content and his calorific content and counting. So that's got to be a good thing. As you're all aware, if you haven't done the change already, then change the chat settings, and then we will have a look at what Bob's going to share with us. And today, Bob is going to share with us mastering crucial conversations. So, again, it's all about proven strategies for managing those challenging conversations, whether in our personal life or in the workplace. Again, Bob only deals with real world examples. He's got some academic theory and science to back all of this up, but it's managing our own state, our own emotions. I don't know how you say that yourself, Bob, but managing your own state when the stakes are high, when opinions differ, and egos are involved. There's a lot to tackle. So, without any fancy further ado, Bob Haywood, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Jim. An honor and a pleasure to be with you all, and Happy New Year to all of you. So, crucial conversations or difficult conversations occur. They are consistent. They appear in our lives all the time. So do put a yes or no in the chat if you recognize any of these, because it doesn't kind of matter if you're in business at a senior level or a mid level or a frontline level. And there are plenty of occasions where difficult conversations come up, and they can be upsetting. They can upset us. They can unsettle things. And they can cause worry and frustrations. And the aim I have today, my promise to you today, is that we'll look at some practical tools, and I will give you some true to life examples. We'll give you some step-by-step frameworks, all of which can give you some immediate changes to make an immediate improvement in what you're trying to tackle with the more challenging conversations that you're having. There is, as ever, an offer for those of you that stay the course for the hour and complete the online survey, which for the first time ever in the life of Thoughts on Thursday webinars is actually the Zoom webinar survey tool itself. So we'll see how that works. So the offer is that each and every one of you that completes the feedback survey will receive the Crucial Conversations quiz, the notes from this seminar or webinar itself, and there are 5 people who are entitled to half price coaching, so a month's worth of coaching from one of the coaching team, which is for 1 hour slots over the course of a month. Half price is around about £450, and one lucky person will be given the option of having a month's coaching for free. So when conversations work, what do you get? Put in the chat, in your view, what you consider to be the great benefits you get when your conversations work. What's the benefit that you feel? And Jim, if you can give me some indication of what's coming through on the chat, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely, Bob. Fulfilled and effective teams, trust. I know you're going to talk about that one big time. Progress, better communication through teams, improved relationships, ownership of decisions, aligned perspectives, new and different perspectives. Not sure what that means, but it says resolutions. So
Mm-hmm.
happy employees and happy people. Let's broaden that a bit more. Yeah. Decisions, clarity, I feel heard.
Wow. Yeah.
And that I've heard them. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Two-way street, improved trust, collaboration. Lots of good stuff there, Bob.
Amazing. I'll say no more. You've captured the lot. When when conversations work, it's truly uplifting for all involved. Now, the reality for me in business is for a conversation to work, it has to be in that top right hand box. Now, this model comes from the book by Kim Scott, Radical Candor. Has anybody read? Put in the notes, put in the chat. Sorry. Has anybody read Radical Candor? It's a phenomenal book. And this is just one of the models that she talks about in there. There's lots of other stuff. But unless we care passionately about the people we're talking to and working with, and are as passionate about producing the results, and are prepared, therefore, to challenge them if they are not showing up as their best self, then actually it's not a great conversation. You know, if you look at the descriptions of the other three options, they're not particularly nice. So for conversations to really work, we have to be as passionate about people's performance as we are about looking after them and caring for them personally. And if we're able to do those two things, then great things do come through. Now, we will mention Kim Scott's work as we go through today, and a lot of the material that is in this webinar and that I use when coaching people on a consistent basis comes from two other books as well. One is called Difficult Conversations, and the other is called Crucial Conversations. And I will send you all the links to all three books later. So when conversations don't work, they kind of fall into three categories. There can be some conversations which are kind of, meh, this is unsatisfactory, it wasn't really fulfilling, but, you know, it wasn't bad. You then have more challenging conversations, which would be listed under the difficult conversation category. And finally, the most problematic, which are called the crucial conversations. Now, what defines a crucial conversation are these three things. If these three things come together, opposing opinions on something that matters greatly, along with strong emotions, then once those three things are locked in to our psyche and our mindset, and probably the psyche and the mindset of the other person in the conversation or the other people in the conversation, then you have a conversation that's going to go Pete Tong. It's not very healthy. So that's the worst that it gets. And we're going to look at some strategies to unravel that and kind of wind it backwards and get it back to a more productive conversation. And we're also going to look at some techniques to try and make sure conversations don't go crucial in the first place. Where does it all begin? Well, it all begins because we as human beings see things differently. Now, I never know what's going to happen when I show this image in a training session or on a webinar like this, because this image, which was launched a couple of decades ago, nearly broke the internet because there was a big argument about it. So in the chat, what color dresses or dress do you see? Do you see a dress which is black and blue? Do you see a dress which is white and gold? Or do you see both? So put something in the chat. Black and blue, white and gold, both.
Quite a lot of black and blue, lots of quite a bit of both as well.
Okay, now the reality of this is that there is one dress which, because of the way it's made, interacts with light differently depending on the light exposure and what's going on with your retina. So each of us see potentially a completely different situation. And because you're seeing this with your bodily senses, it's quite hard to be argued against. Now, the left-hand image for me is white and gold. The right-hand image for me is black and blue. So I see both. Now, some people can only see the black and the blue, and the left-hand picture might be a murky blue and a murky black, but it is definitely not white and gold. Yet the reality is there are some of us that see this differently. Some people cannot see the white and gold dress. Now, if your body senses tell you that everybody else is talking blah, blah, when they say there's a white and gold dress, it's very hard to argue. We see things differently. Our psyche, our mindset, our upbringing, our biases, our beliefs, there's so much that goes on in human psychology, which means even though two people are looking at the same thing, even though two people are hearing the same thing, that event means something different to them. And I've used this image because it attacks the body senses in a more dramatic way than this one. Most of us kind of get this one, that depending where you stand, you see a different number. And you can easily work out that if you stood in a different place, you can see the 6 or the 9. Most of us get that. If your body senses disagree, and I'm saying there is a white and gold dress and you cannot see it, then it's much harder for you to accept that somebody else can see things differently. And fundamentally, that is at the heart of difficult conversations, even unsatisfactory conversations, and it's definitely the heart of crucial conversations. So unraveling that one's a huge step forward. So we have to accept that people see things differently. So here's a typical scenario. Somebody, a friend, walks past you in the street without saying hello. That happens, and some people will get upset. And whilst the chemicals are going around their body, they'll try and work out why that happened. Is that person ignoring me? Is she angry with me? Have I done something wrong? And psychologists will have a debate with you about whether when that event happens, your chemical reaction, your emotional reaction comes first, or your emotional reaction comes second. But it kind of doesn't matter whether the thoughts come first or the chemicals come first. In the chat, though, type in what actually happened.
I like what Alan said, their friend hasn't got their lenses in.
Oh, bless. Now, that's a possibility that we've dreamt up. And this is what happens. It's very hard to just go, the friend walked past us. That's all that happened. The friend
they didn't see us. You changed your hair color, so they didn't recognize you. Okay.
You see what we're making up. All that happened was somebody walked past us and didn't say hello. Now, did they see us? That's an interpretation. Did they not see us? That's an interpretation. Have they not got their lenses in? That's an interpretation. So whatever happens to us, whatever somebody says to us or doesn't say to us, whatever somebody does or does not do, we don't have a choice as a human being. We have to interpret the event. There's an action by somebody else which may or may not have a particular intent, and that intent will deliver an impact on us. And that means, whether we like it or not, despite there being visible and audible facts, there are also instant emotions and thoughts that hit us. We don't really have much of a choice. We start making up stories about what's happened or what somebody has said. And it's those stories that start revolving around our head that cause us all the problem. It's not the visible or audible facts, it's the stories we make up about it. Now, one of the things that happens is we start to hear another conversation going on in our heads. So in the middle of having a conversation with one of our colleagues, one of our friends, one of our family, if that conversation starts to bring up issues which we're not particularly comfortable with, there's been a mistake or something's gone wrong, then you start to have these conversations in your head about, well, okay, well, was that my fault? Was that their fault? What actually happened? What went wrong? Who's to blame? How do I feel about that? I'm not sure how I feel about that. How's that impact on me and my opinion and my identity of myself and what you think about me? And so you have these different conversations going on in your head whilst you're trying to hold a normal conversation with somebody else. And as those conversations in our head start to develop, and that hooks us, and the conversations going on in our head kind of takes over. And despite us having some really positive intentions with the actual conversation with our colleague or colleagues, where we want to be constructive and we want to have a healthy goal around that communication exercise, because of all this stuff going on in our head, it becomes more and more difficult. Now, if you think about what you really, really want, a la Spice Girls, what you really, really want from a communication exercise, from a deliberate conversation, which of these goals do you consider healthy? So in the chat, write in what you think are or is at least one of the healthy goals that you would really want from a genuine conversation with one of your team or one of your friends or one of your family.
Okay, we've got a lot of shared understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Produce results, whatever results mean, I'm not sure, but learn shared understanding, solve problems, discover the truth, win-win.
Wonderful. Good set of conclusions. So here's my version of the list of unhealthy goals and healthy goals. The effective goals, the healthy goals, will move the relationship and the conversation forward. We got a chance of experiencing what we talked about very early on. When a conversation goes really well, what do we get? And if our intention, if our goals around these communications, be they difficult conversations or crucial conversations, if our goals, if our intentions are on the right-hand side of that slide, we've got a chance. So I want to ask you a question. Why is avoiding conflict an unhealthy goal? Please put your thoughts in the chat. Why is avoiding conflict an unhealthy goal?
Some of the answers, Bob, do you want them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so situations fester and undermine trust. And what else have we got? It's self-centered conflict because it doesn't deal with the real issue, because conflict is, conflict is daily. It's self-centered. Conflicts allow our truth to impact, to be discussed, not building new pathways in your brain. Interesting one.
Nice.
Lots of pushes the issue down the road and likely only to get worse.
Very true. Very true. And conflict gets a bad rap. Conflict, if you look at the root of the word, means two things turn to face each other. And really, if two people turn to face each other and the conflict is with the other person and you're attacking the other person, that is not good. And that's why conflict gets a bad rap. What really we should be doing is turning the issue on itself. So if we attack the issue rather than the other person, there's no reason for us to get annoyed. go back to Kim Scott and radical candor. If we care passionately enough about the other person, that we uplift them, that we uphold them, that we enhance their feeling of respect and identity, and at the same time challenge the issue, then there is every reason to say that conflict is incredibly healthy, because that conflict will produce a change in the understanding of both parties, because you're debating two different points of view. And at some point, the two of you are going to come to a shared understanding. And I really wish the word communication didn't exist. For me, the word itself, communication, disempowers so many people because they think that if they broadcast their opinion, they have communicated. But communication is a one-way exercise. I've told you, my job's over. And of course, just our words do not actually carry the full weight of everything we're trying to communicate. And we've no idea that if we've broadcast X, that the other person doesn't understand Y. There is a completely different scenario that's completely and absolutely possible and occurs 9 or 10 times a day with the people we talk to, is whatever we say, they hear something completely different. So I really wish we talked about a calibrated understanding, a mutual calibration of understanding where what you understand and what I understand is exactly the same. Because if that were the central goal, then a lot of the angst around difficult conversations and crucial conversations would disappear. To get to that point, you have to have safety in that conversation and in that relationship. If somebody feels safe enough, they will tell you what they think. If they know you've got their back and that whatever happens, you're going to uplift them and enhance their identity, not attack them. If the two of you are collaborating to tackle the issue, then people feel safe enough to contribute. If people don't feel safe enough to contribute, then they either move towards silence or they move towards violence, both of which completely disempower the people involved in the conversation, because you're not getting everything from the people in that conversation. They're not telling you what they need to tell you. They're not saying what they really need to say. And because things are left unsaid, we end up making naff conclusions and naff decisions, and those issues perpetuate and get worse over time. So we have to find a way of tackling that. Now, it is important during this session that you're writing some things down. So, ideas are coming at you fairly fast. So please make sure you're writing down some of the insights you're getting. And it's your reaction to what I'm saying that matters most, not the words I'm saying. Write down also your reaction to what's being said, because you've only got to pull off a couple of ideas from today's webinar for your hour to be well spent. So please remember to write some things down as we go.
Yeah, I like what Stephen said there, Bob. It isn't what you transmit, but what the other person receives.
Fundamentally. And of course, if you know what they've received, you've got half a chance. If you don't know what they've received, you haven't got any chance at all. So not only have we got to try and get our message across properly, we've got to find out what the other person's understood and try and understand that fully ourselves. Now, once a conversation stops working, even at the low level, when it's become there rather than effective, we start to become blind to our own role in the conversation. Our motives start to degrade. We start to limit our choices. We start to stop listening, if you can say that, but our listening really drops off. We start drawing conclusions on their intent, and we start to feel the impact of that, and our feelings start to take over. We move from trying to engage in mutual calibration of understanding to either protecting ourselves, attacking, or withdrawing, and those things become problematic. So I'm going to suggest a new approach to every single conversation that you now have in the future. This is an immediate thing that you can do with every single conversation from now on. Please imagine that in every conversation you're having with one other person or a group of people, there's a third conversation going on. So when we're in a conversation, it's pretty clear if there's two people in the room, two people in that conversation, there are at least two stories. There's my story, how I see what happened, how I feel about it, what I think that means to me, and there's their story. Because it doesn't matter what we've said or not said, or what we've done, what we've not done. It's our interpretation that causes the problem. So how the other person sees what's happened, what they feel about it, and what that means to them, that's their story. So we've got my story going on and their story going on. So we've got at least those two conversations going on, in addition to us actually verbally having a conversation. The third conversation is the neutral, objective, factual description of the situation that leaves out the blame and the focus, so that both people can share a platform from which both of them can explore their perspectives and their feelings. This in itself reduces defensiveness. It avoids the you versus me. It intentionally creates some common ground, and it shifts blame to learning. The third conversation is about understanding, not about winning. So how do you do that? Well, practice deliberately describing issues as factually as possible, as observable behaviors. Watch out for the different perspectives and interpretations you might put on them. Try work very hard to limit the amount of interpretations you put in. Describe the facts, describe what actually was said or not said, done or not done, and move towards curiosity so that you can acknowledge both sides of the story. State that you recognize that the other person has a completely different view to yours, and invite them to share not just how they see those things, but what that means to them and how they feel about it. Start framing every conversation as a joint problem-solving effort. Even using questions like, how can we move things forward together? Whatever you can do to emphasize curiosity and acceptance that you've probably contributed in one way or another to wherever you've got to in this difficult conversation. So instead of saying, you never meet deadlines and it's affecting the team, you could say, we've had a few projects where the deadlines weren't met. I know I've felt frustrated. I imagine you might have your own perspective on that. How about the two of us talk about what's happening and what's going on and how we could address it? The key phrases to use the third conversation is things like, here's how I see it, and I'm interested to see how differently you see it. Or, we seem to have different perspectives on what happened. Let's talk both sides through. Or, I'd like to understand your view as well as have you understand my view so we can figure this out together. Move your conversations forward by imagining there's this third dialogue that's got to happen. We somehow have to create a factual platform so that two people can share their perspectives safely. Another thing you can do straight away is to swap curiosity into the equation. Stop thinking about certainty. Stop thinking about, I'm right, you're wrong. Or if you're right, that makes me wrong. That's a problem. If we can produce this shift, again, defensiveness goes down. Curiosity will kill off that defensiveness and it will promote learning. It enables collaboration. It builds trust. People trust those who listen and seek to understand. People don't trust as easily the people who are trying to persuade. So it's really important that we put the front foot forwards based on listening and seeking to understand. How can you practice that? Acknowledge that you have your own story and that it's not the only one. This might be how I see it, and I realize that means I'm going to be missing something. Ask genuine, humble, open questions. How do you see things as a humble question rather than an attack? What was your experience? What's led you to that conclusion? Listen to understand and not respond. Focus on their words. Focus on trying to understand how their tone or body language might be tweaking the meaning of those words. and be willing to be surprised. Let go of the need to be right. Be open and be prepared to be surprised once people start to tell you what they intended. Now, there is a difference between the impact of someone's delivery of a message and what they intended to deliver. And if we can be willing just to accept that one thing, that although I've been upset, that might not have been your intention. There is a gap between intent and impact that we need to talk about. So while I know what I intended, I also need to understand how what I intended has impacted you and vice versa. Those things can make a transformative difference. I'm curious about how you experience this, you could say. Help me understand your thinking. Tell me more about what's important to you here. I may be missing something. What's your take on this? If we can take a humble curiosity approach, we've got a chance of breaking through. Please remember to write things down. You've only got to take a couple of actions out of today, and today will have paid off big time. Move to contribution over blame. Blame is about finding fault. Who's at fault in this conversation? Somebody must be. Contribution is about understanding how I and you have acted, have decided, and those actions and decisions have created the circumstances that's created this situation. We co-designed this problem, even though we don't want to admit it. So how did we each get here is your contribution. And the goal of tackling difficult conversations and crucial conversations is to move away from the blame game. It's not only us that has to move away from that, it's the other person too. And we have to somehow encourage them to drop the defensiveness and explore mutually how we've both contributed to the states that we found ourselves in. It's hugely important to remove the defensiveness and promote the learning and encourage accountability, because everyone can now own their part, which is essential for real change. You can only fix what you genuinely understand, including your own part. Remember that you can only fix what you genuinely understand, including your own part in creating this. We co-design the situations we find ourselves in, and getting both parties to recognize that is huge. How might you do that? In your conversation, acknowledge that situations are complex. There's a lot going on. There are multiple causes and multiple contributing factors. Be explicit and upfront about your own contribution. Be vulnerable. Model vulnerability and responsibility. Say things like, I realize I didn't clarify the deadline as clearly as I thought. Looking back, I can see I've avoided raising this issue before. Admit your vulnerability and your responsibility. Go first with that, and then invite the other person to share their perspective. How do you see your role in what happened? What is there that I might have missed from your side? Ask, how did we each contribute? What did I do or not do that played a role in this? What did you do or not do that played a role in this? Where are there misunderstandings? Where are there unclear expectations or external pressures? And if possible, go beyond the current dialogue and the current issue and explore whatever patterns exist. Because if this is not the first time you've ended up in a difficult conversation with this person, it won't be the last unless you explore those patterns. So you could say, instead of, you missed the deadline and now the project is late, you could say, a deadline was missed. I realize I didn't follow up as closely as I could have. I may not have been clear about the urgency. What was your experience? How did we both play a part in contributing to this delay? Or what's your perspectives? It's really important that we own up to our own contribution and lead with that and think about what we could have done differently, because that vulnerability enables possibly the other person to drop their defenses and start to own up. Another thing you can do is discuss the intent and impact gap and the feelings it creates. Undiscussed feelings creates misunderstandings. And people are really quick to assume the negative intent behind most people's actions. So those unspoken feelings which come out of the impact of the unspoken intent often derail conversations and damage trust. So clarifying intent really matters. You can actually make your intent visible, audible, break it down, say what your intent is, what I'm trying to do here, what my actions and my words are aiming at is this, and admit that your intent, there is a gap between what you intended and the impact your actual words or actions have on the other person. They receive it in a completely different way. I didn't mean to exclude you from a meeting. That's not my intention. I felt left out, and I've felt undervalued. Could be the impact on the other person, but our intent was not to exclude them in the first place. It just so happened they got excluded, and now they've taken a negative assumption to our intentions, and it's hurt them because they've felt left out and undervalued. So we have to admit that there is a gap between intent and impact. So we need to surface and express our intentions and start naming some of those feelings that we have, whether they're frustrations or being upset or being afraid of upsetting people. We have to invite other people to explain how they feel, just to validate and explore out of curiosity, not to judge or dismiss. How can you do that? Well, acknowledge that gap. I can see my words had a bigger impact than I intended. I'm sorry. I did not set out to undermine you. My goal was to keep the project on track. I felt disappointed when the deadline was missed. Still, how has all my actions and words come across to you? How did you feel after I said ... How did you feel after our last meeting? I realize now how that must have sounded to you, and I'm sorry for the impact it had. Putting that stuff on the table takes away an awful lot of the defensiveness and the angst, creates an environment which is safe enough for the other person to say what's really on their mind and in their heart. Please remember to write some stuff down so that you can take action on it later. Another technique you can use straight away is to explore the identity that's under threat. Particularly when feedback is negative or there's conflict or disagreements beginning to arise, you can create some unconscious triggers, or you start to fire some unconscious triggers about who we are as people and our confidence and whether we're good people, whether we have any worth to this team or this business. So these identity triggers are hot buttons that sit beneath the surface of the topic, and you get strong, unexpected reactions from people when these triggers are pulled, when the hot buttons are hit. And you're like, well, where did that come from? Well, it came about because we've hit a sore spot. We've hit an identity hot button or an identity trigger. They're very commonplace. It's easy for us to think about, am I good enough in my job? Am I capable enough? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? Am I fair enough? Am I ethical enough? Am I valued? Am I respected? Am I accepted? Do I fit in? Am I part of the team? All these are identities, and every one of these can come under threat. And if they come under threat, we start to become defensive or angry. We withdraw, we shut down, we overreact, we start to attack. Anything can happen. We'll start that journey to verbal silence or verbal violence. What can we do instead? Explore the identity issues. Notice your triggers. Ask yourself, what is it about this conversation that feels threatening to me? Where is that attacking my self-image? Be honest with yourself, at least. Acknowledge that we all have vulnerability. Put on the table the stuff that you are feeling. In a conversation, when your tummy starts to wobble, and you've got a feeling going through your tummy, one of the best things you can do is just put that on the table. Look, I'm noticing that I'm beginning to feel defensive. I think it's because I care about being seen as reliable. And part of why this is so hard for me is I do want to be fair. And I'm worried that in this conversation, you'll be thinking that I'm not fair. Vulnerability is one of the greatest assets of high performance leaders. Normalize these identity struggles. Everybody has these triggers. Naming them reduce their powers. It's normal for us to feel unsettled when our intentions and our abilities come into question. Putting that out there helps diffuse it, takes away its power. And if you can help other people explore those triggers, it can be very powerful. You can say things like, I wonder if this feedback feels like a challenge to you in how you see yourself. I wonder about how this situation is making you feel and whether you're feeling it's unfair or I'm attacking you personally. Putting this out there and helping people verbalize their own triggers around their identity can be huge. And finally, ground yourself in the fact that you actually have two identities, whether you like it or not. I can be competent and still make mistakes. That's a dual identity. I can care and still upset people sometimes. I'm not all good and I'm not all bad. We have dual personalities. Sometimes we have a perfectionist mindset about ourselves. Now, of course, we judge ourselves by our intentions and we know what they are. And we believe our intentions to be absolutely honorable all of the time. The reality is that other people judge us by our behaviors, by what we say and what we do, or what we don't say and what we don't do. And that causes the problem because they interpret that. They make all that stuff up. So I want to talk about some feedback. While I'm worried that you'll think I don't value your work, that is not the case. I do value you. I do value your work. I also care about being honest. How comfortable are you if I'm very direct with you? We can bring these identity questions into the mix. It makes a difference. Something else we can do is say what needs to be said. Too many of us rely on mind reading. I don't know how skilled your team are about mind reading. My own team are not particularly good at it, and neither am I. So clear, direct communication is far better than trying to hope that people can guess our thoughts and our feelings and our intentions. So be very careful. And one way to be very clear and yet not attack the person, more attack the issue, is to use a mechanism like COIN. So COIN is a very clever framework for a conversation where you can be very clear and very specific, because you start the conversation off with the context. When the meeting was overrunning yesterday, that's the context. Observe behavior. You kept bringing up new topics that were not on the original agenda. That's the observed behavior. Now, both parties were at the meeting, and that was actually what was said. That was actually what was done. We've stuck to the facts. We've not laid in an interpretation. Impact. I felt frustrated. Use the word I. I felt, I noticed. Keep the focus on the word I. When you're telling somebody off, keep the focus on the word I. When you're selling, put the focus on the word you. I felt frustrated by that. It slowed the whole thing down for me and named the issue that you're really worried about. I'm worried about how overrunning the senior management meetings impacts on the rest of my day. And I wonder what kind of role model I am being by accepting the overruns. Next is, what do you want that person to do in future? In future, could we please find a way of ending the meetings on time? And that takes us into the future. So we're not trying to make the past wrong. We're trying to make the future better. So COIN is a great feedback mechanism. It invites their perspectives. It checks for understanding. It makes sure that we take the things further forward rather than just blame the past. Remember, write things down as we go. It's really important. Now, if a conversation does go crucial, if it becomes unsafe, there is no point talking more about the content. We have to stop talking about the content and start thinking about how to rebuild the safety. So all those mechanisms that we've discussed so far, and there's about 6 of them, it can help us keep a difficult conversation from going crucial. If it goes Pete Tong and the defenses go up or you start being attacked, then you've got to stop thinking about talking about the content. You can consider your own behavior and your own contribution of what might have contributed to the conversation going Pete Tong. You've also got to think about, okay, are we moving to silence or are we moving to violence? Now, masking consists of understating things, presenting sarcasm and sugarcoating and couching things. We're hiding our real meaning. Avoiding means we're not saying what we should be saying, and withdrawing means literally pulling out the conversation together. If we start to attack people, then we're coercing others, we're overstating things, we're forceful, we're loud, we're labeling and starting to try and change the perceptions. We could even be attacking the individual, let alone the issue itself. There's a whole bunch of things that come into the realm of verbal violence or verbal silence, which are the signs this meeting, this conversation has gone crucial, and I've got to stop talking about the content and rebuild safety. So here's a bunch of words. In the chat, which of one of these words, or which few of these words, if you can find more than one, are moving people to verbal silence? Find one of these phrases or words which means they are moving to verbal silence and stick them in the chat.
Accusations, cutting people off, masking, belittling.
Masking is silence. Cutting people off is violence.
Belittling, speaking in absolutes, withdrawing.
That's silence. The other two were violence.
Understanding, avoiding people.
Silence. Yeah. It's worth going through this as an exercise. We will send this out for all those that complete the exit survey, understanding the difference between what is a sign of verbal violence versus what is a sign of verbal silence. If you can spot the early signs, then it's really useful to understand the difference between them. Now, in fairness, you've also got to remember that you can do all of those non-verbally. So people don't have to actually say them. You can just see it in their eyes. So all of us are used to other people looking at us in a peculiar way. And that look can describe an awful lot of behaviors. So when others move to verbal silence or verbal violence, we have to use 3 steps. The 3-step solution is step out of the content. Once you notice a condition of verbal silence or violence exists, stop with the content. Nobody's listening. Step 2, rebuild the safety. And once you're sure the safety has been rebuilt, you can step back into the content. Now, that might take the whole of the meeting that you have for the rest of the time you've allowed, and therefore you're going to have to talk about the content another time. Who knows? If safety's not been rebuilt, there is no point talking about the content. Nobody's listening. Get over it. The good news is there are not that many tools that you need for rebuilding safety. Really, there's only 3 tools that you need. You know, when there is a genuine problem with respect, we just need to apologize. When there's been a genuine problem with mutual purpose, well, surprise, surprise, we need to create a mutual purpose. And when there's been a misunderstanding, then we need to use a tool called a contrast statement or a contrasting statement. There's only 3 tools, and 2 of these you probably know how to do already. I'm expecting most of you know how to apologize, so please put into a chat, yes or no, do you know how to apologize? Extra session for anybody that says no. We need to be humble. We need to be vulnerable. if we're not prepared to go first with this and apologize for the upset, if not for anything else, then we may never get things to go any further. Creating a mutual...
And it must be sincere apologies.
Yes. I'm seriously considering apologizing to you soon is not sincere. It's got to be humble. It's got to be sincere. Mutual purpose. Dialogue, effective communication, in my view, cannot happen at all unless and until mutual purpose exists. Without agreeing mutual purpose consciously, and people often withhold stuff anyway. So mutual purpose foundational for trust. You want to ensure that's in play all the time anyway. Now, that may mean that you've got to point out that you believe in this conversation you're at cross purposes. And you may need to go back to trying to recognize what the real purpose is behind the current strategy or the current conversation. You may have to make a commitment in that meeting to find a new goal and invent a mutual purpose, because in that conversation you realize you're coming at it from two perspectives and 2 points of views and two different goals. And if those two goals are competing, there is no mutual purpose. Therefore, there is no mutual trust. And this conversation is never going to go well. Now, there may be some intent and some purpose behind the mutual purpose. It's true, but you need to explore those things. Otherwise, we can't get to a position of trust. Now, that's not too different from some of the stuff we already do to try and create goals and alignments with our team, as most leaders would have already done some appraisals and feedback sessions. Most of you would have tried influence and persuading people before, and you know that it's important to get onto one page, is it's important to share some commonality in the goals and the purpose. So it's not a completely new world. The one technique in crucial conversations that is different, that needs a bit of training, is using a contrasting statement, because this highlights your intention and confirms your respect for them and clarifies your authentic commitment to that mutual purpose. And it's well worth getting into the habit of creating contrasting statements. Now, a contrasting statement simply says what you don't intend to do, what you did not intend to do, what your intention is not first. So a contrasting statement starts with what you're not trying to do and then finishes with what you are trying to do. You know, I didn't set out in this conversation to upset you. I'm sorry that you're upset. My intention in this conversation was to find some common ground to move this project forward. You know, think about how your purpose might have been misunderstood and put it on the table. Just observe how the other person's reacting and understand there's a difference between your intention and the impact of what you delivered. There's a gap. So put that pain on the table. Say, look, I didn't set out to create confusion. I didn't set out to create misunderstanding. I didn't set out to disrespect you. You know, put those things on the table as the don't, and then say, this is my real motivation. This is my real intention. This is how I genuinely want you to feel at the end of this meeting. And if you can do that in a respectful and dignified and humble way, then those contrasting statements are hugely empowering. I could not tell you how many times I've sat with a client in a coaching session and created a couple of contrasting statements, and they've gone off and delivered them in real life situations and diffused so many battles. It's a game changer as a technique. So I implore you to remember it and do something with it. So please write some stuff down so that you can do stuff after today. Hello. This is Bob Hayward again. We've had a bit of a whoopsie. The computer systems let us down, and my laptop decided to reboot itself. We only had a few slides left. I know that Jim handled the situation well, and you sensibly decided to close the previous session. It took me 5 minutes to get the computer back up and running. Well, it took the computer 5 minutes to get itself back up and running, by which time everyone sensibly had exited. So I will go over the last couple of slides. We were pretty close to the end of the content material, so I'll go over them now. Talk tentatively is one of the very powerful techniques from Crucial Conversations, because we've got to strike a fair and confident, reasonable balance when we share the facts and our stories, as well as when we respond to others and their stories. Yeah, it is absolutely counterproductive to use kind of wrong way, right way, forceful language like, the matter of the fact is, that's a dumb idea. The only reasonable option in this situation is ... And if I agreed with you, we'd both be wrong. It is absolutely pointless. Yeah, we're going to just create the kind of angst that we're trying to avoid. So if we talk tentatively and allow wriggle room in the way things are expressed, then people feel more able to contribute. And once they contribute, you've got a chance of influencing them. We don't have it so much these days because we've got power steering. In the old days, if you had nice, thick, chunky tires and it was all down to a cable, when you turn the steering wheel, then unless the car was moving, you weren't turning those front wheels. If you start moving, the front wheels turn really easily. And that's the same with talking tentatively. When we land it too emphatically and too forcefully, there's no wriggle room, there's no movement. If you talk tentatively and get the other person to do something similar, then you've both got wriggle room and the debate can move forward. Encourage testing. Remember, the purpose of this whole communication exercise is to increase the calibration of understanding, not to convince, not to compel, not to control. So if we test ideas out with people and test their understanding, test their views on the matter, then we've got a chance to move them towards common ground and a common understanding. And once we have a mutual calibration of understanding, I understand you, you understand me, we're on the one page, we've got a chance of making a better decision. If someone's not shared everything or doesn't understand everything, we're going to end up making a naff decision and the relationship, or at least the conversation, is going to go south. Now, if you're going to have a passionate debate with someone as you're testing these ideas out, that's fine. The only limit to how strongly we can express our views is our willingness to be equally vigorous, encouraging others to challenge our views and propose alternatives. So if you want to get passionate about stuff, you've got to encourage that other person to get passionate about it. And then the two of you can have a ding dong, so long as both of you are still smiling. Now, if you're having a ding dong and one party's not smiling, either you or them, stop. It's not working. It's gone verbally violent. No one's listening to the content. Reboot the situation, recover the safety, and then try a different option. So to attempt to bring a lot of these techniques together into one process, there is a model from Crucial Conversations called states. And this really encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about. So we have to share our facts as logically and unambiguously and fairly and humbly and tentatively as we possibly can. We need a platform of facts from our side and from their side that we can both stand upon. We can stand upon that shared platform. We've got a chance. Yes, we have to tell our stories of conclusions and intentions and feelings, and we've got to do that as fairly as possible. And we've got to invite the other person to do exactly the same, share their facts and share their stories. During that process, our objective has to be the mutual calibration of understanding, not to influence, not to defend, not to control, not to debate. Get them talking their stuff through, ask them, invite them, challenge them to allow us to get our stuff through without all the angst that normally goes around it. Talk tentatively, encourage testing, and as you draw those mutual calibrations together, hopefully the two of you can set a mutual goal, a mutual purpose, and agree a mutual action plan to move things forward. So, as we draw this webinar to a close, hopefully we've gone over a number of practical tools. I would say at least 13, 6 from difficult conversations and 7 from crucial conversations. Hopefully the real to life examples of how you could say these things has landed for you, and you can sense the step-by-step frameworks that we've put in play from those tools. Any of these tools can have an immediate impact if you use them. So deliberately put in play 2 or 3 of these techniques as soon as you possibly can. And obviously don't just try them once. Give them a good run out. I encourage you and implore you to do that because it will improve your conversations and improve your relationships. Now, sadly, because of the computer crash, we don't have a live Q&A. I will send some extra handouts and supporting documents to try and compensate for that. And I really appreciate you tolerating the whoopsie and being patient while we got the recordings out to you. Next month, 5th February, 11 a.m., the man himself, Jim Heatherton, will be talking on mastering time. I'm going over some proven strategies so you can get more done. And hopefully that webinar will be a great platform for you to make an amazing 2026. So thank you very much for being with us during the webinar. I'm presuming the exit survey from Zoom worked, and that worked when you exited the webinar on Thursday. If there's a way of me making that webinar survey link live again to go out with this video, I will, but I don't know that bit of the technology. So thank you for your patience, and I look forward to seeing you next month on the 5th of February for Jim Heatherton and Mastering Time. Bye-bye.